Evening and welcome once again to Gaming Under the Influence. I'm Mike here with Alex, coming to you from GreenDragonCVR in Woodbridge to talk about video games. How are you, bro?
Oh yeah, I'm good, man. How are you?
Not so bad. Back to Xenoblade after finishing Elden Ring's DLC.
Holy. I'm still marching towards the DLC. I'm pathetic, but
okay.
We'll get there.
Yeah, that's okay. It's all about the journey.
The journey. You know what? It is a journey. That's, wow, quite the journey at that.
You know what? I was thinking about this in another context recently, but it's a game, you know. The playing of it is something you do for its own sake, so hurtling towards the end is not even necessarily desirable, I don't think.
No, I don't. That's you know what? That's half the problem, if you consider it a problem, is that I wanted to beeline towards the boss that would grant me access to the DLC, but like having such a great time, no rush to do that. Plus, it's hard to, rush through anyway. So.
Yeah, wouldn't you be disappointed though if everything you met you beat it in one hit, one shot? One try, right? Like it. That wouldn't be a Souls game anymore.
No, yeah, exactly. So anyway, I'm not, just moseying along, and when I get there, I get there. But you finished it, so that's cool.
That's good, man. Yeah, I did like the DLC a lot, even the final boss. And I thought it was more well balanced, I guess you could say, than the end game bosses in the main game. But we can talk about that in another episode.
Some other time. I
think it'd be interesting to talk about, given how much the past few days Game Pass and its recent price adjustment has been in the news.
Yep.
Restate our opinions on live service gaming and on subscription distribution, because to my estimation these things are linked, actually.
Yeah, it's kind of the other side of that, right? They
go together.
The side feeding,
Yeah. If you want people to keep subscribing, you can't give them things with an end, or a collection of things with an end that potentially the ones with the most time are going to finish in a couple of weeks, right? Like, you need live services and subscription because they both have the same end to continue to extract money from the consumer in perpetuity, right? And live service games, they're perfectly suited to subscription distribution. You pay your...
So they go perfectly hand in hand, basically.
Yeah. And I know it's been in fashion to talk down about, or to condescend to live service games for quite some time now.
It has been.
It's not like anybody's breaking the mold by saying they don't like such games anymore, and there's so many high profile flops at this point that we don't even have to recount it. But I think it gets lost often what exactly is wrong with this kind of game design. People start spouting stuff about consumer friendly business practices and how in this case it's not that, and how, to me this all suggests that there's some hypothetical good live service game that just hasn't been made yet, and if this nice company comes along and just doesn't want to take too much money from you, then it'll come out right. But I think that this kind of like normie criticism of the genre or format or whatever you want to call it kind of doesn't touch on what the worst aspect of this way of making games is. We've noticed that companies that make these kind of games, their biggest concern is retention of players.
Yeah, right? Of course, right?
Not even necessarily sales.
Keep you engaged, playing it, spending money in the store, right? All that good stuff.
Yeah. And somebody might counter and say, well, people who make single player game are probably concerned with the sales too, and no doubt they are.
Yeah.
No doubt they are.
Definitely.
But I think the distinguishing factor here is that generating those numbers is the entire purpose of a live service game. The same way your phone is for calling your mom and your your keyboard is for typing out stuff on your computer, right? Like, I think in the other cases, somebody making a single player game, a game with a story, the kind of games we've lionized on this channel before. It's like a man who's gone mining and found something in the ground. He's coming to you, maybe he wants to sell it, and maybe some money is going to change hands. No doubt there's an economy that could grow up around that kind of transaction.
Sure, yeah.
But the difference is the guy's not starting with the guy doesn't have empty hands and just the desire to make a profit before he comes to you, right?
Yeah.
The difference is that the economy is accidental to his game making and your playing of that game. Whereas here, the game is nothing but sort of like virtual drapery on top of a profit motive, right?
Yeah.
It's nothing but assets and a feeble story contrived to plaster on top of your playing this game so there can be ads in your face and your money can go into the online store, right? The game is nothing but an economic model with a virtual skin. It's not a game that somebody's selling you. It's the desire to make money posturing as a game.
Yeah, it's boardroom style designed, like many others that come before it, and they all seem to emulate like similar vibes. It's kind of ridiculous when you think about it, because people have kind of grown sick of this.
There's even a superficially apparent sameness to them. You know, even when you look at, like we were talking about Concord just before we started recording this video, it literally looks like Overwatch.
It does.
It looks like Marvel
like
meets
you're
Overwatch.
watching Overwatch.
It looks like they just took all of the slop that
and slowed it
the
down.
most objectionable types of people are into nowadays, and they put it in a blender and they're trying to like inject it back into your veins. It's like,
yeah, it's like you know, what was it called? Lawbreakers.
Lawbreakers. Sure. Cliff Blazinski. Oh, buddy.
It's like Lawbreakers a couple of years ago. I even thought
What
that was
is
going to
that?
be DOA back in
or like Anthem. What are you? What
or yeah.
are you
something
making,
like
man?
Anthem,
What
yeah.
are you doing? Like,
I don't know.
and you know, I think the total inauthenticity, the lack of inner life that we're kind of touching on when we say there's a sameness to it, it's not attractive. Like, the point is, like, you know, given that you start from an economic premise, like the game can't have its own inner life. It can't have its own integrity that once you set apart people, you know, interacting with each other using it, once you set apart the store and the desire to make money, like, what's left, bro? There's no story, there's no inner drama. It doesn't have its own self-contained inner life and merit apart from anybody buying or selling it, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Nowadays, you know, a game could be off any store whatsoever. Like, you could find the emulator if it was made a while. Like, go find Xenogears from PS1. You know, maybe they didn't finish the story and it's all crammed on the second disc and this and that, but the thing is a self-contained work.
Yeah,
it doesn't
exactly.
depend even on your playing it to exist, right? Like, it is,
Yeah,
it's there, you know, it's out in the world, it's got its own inner life and integrity, but the live service is nothing but a means for you to interact with the hope that in doing so you'll spend a couple of bucks.
money.
Right?
Yeah.
It doesn't have any inner life of its own.
They're like farms, right?
It's like a cardboard
Social
cutout of a town,
profit, yeah.
like a movie set, you know? And that's the fundamental problem with this kind of game design. When you go to make a game like this, what you're doing first of all is you got a profit motive, and you're ad hoc attempting afterwards to tack on the artistic elements, right?
Yep.
And that's the wrong approach.
That's exactly it.
You might be able to sell something that you've made, and however we feel about that, it really doesn't impact the thing in its inner life, if you understand my meaning, right? Like, you're passing a book to me, like whatever's written on the pages is there, you know?
Yeah.
The live service game is not like that.
No, it's not.
Without us passing it back and forth, it doesn't exist, right?
Right.
So I think it can't be a self-contained thing, good for its own sake, the way a good single player game can be. I think this, you know, you could extend this criticism to something like any kind of party game or a multiplayer game or whatever too, right? Like, in the sense that,
To some degree, yeah.
although the counter would be then, you know, how do you elevate that kind of like human interaction to something else? Well, that's the boundary between just slop and a sport, I guess you could say,
I mean,
right?
I think, you know, if, we're gonna sound old, but back in the day, multiplayer was tacked on to typically
True.
a single player experience.
Oh, no
right?
doubt it was,
Once they became their own thing, and then people figure out how to exploit, you know, via live service and additional, you know, DLC purchases, this, that, like, things really
that became
exploded.
silly too,
and that's how kind of we got here. Like, what the heck?
I
you
get
know?
it. I think though, like, what I'm trying to say is, like, in those games though, I would absolutely, like, without hesitation, I would say they don't qualify as the same kind of thing as a JRPG or a Souls-like, you know, like, I wouldn't think of them as art in that sense, that they're works created for their own sake that exist, you know, with the same merit apart from human interaction. But like, the same way we could say, you know, of like a competitive shooting or racing or this or that, like the competition people do using those things might exist for its own sake. Maybe that could be considered sport, and somebody qualified in that area could talk about it in a way that I can't, you know? That makes sense to me. But insofar as we're looking at these things as games on par with, you know,
Yeah, I would say it's more like, you know, the stuff we play and talk about is more akin to like novel style,
Novel-esque,
you know,
not sport.
Whereas, like I've played a lot of Counter-Strike in the past, and that would be competitive, like sport, like you said, right? They're like two very distinctly different things, right?
But it's because of what you're doing with the thing. Like, is the playing for its own sake in order for you to get at what's in the text, or are you playing in order to accomplish something outside it, like winning the competition, let's say?
Right.
That's like an extra ludic goal, I've heard people call it before. And this is a good term, right? It's like something outside the game you're trying to accomplish using it.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it, you know, a different kind of artifact. The thing that the guy's made is different than if he's written a novel or something.
Yeah.
And I don't think that that's necessarily bad, and that's why I'm invoking this idea of sport and stuff like this. But in the case of live service games, the guy is not making the game for its own sake. He's not making it for the sake of your whatever. The only reason he's making it is because it's
to
a
make
storefront,
money.
And so I think it's almost the total subjugation of games to the profit motive. That's what we see in live service. They're not games, bro. They're stores with digital digital drapery.
Yeah,
And,
digital storefronts designed to just kind of consume your attention and make you spend a couple of bucks, and whatever.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
I think a perfect competitive game, it just wouldn't be a good live service, right? It would be like chess, too self-contained. You could pick it up and leave. You don't need the guy who made it anymore.
No,
He can't sell you anything, right? It's all it's too self-sufficient. Nobody needs to pay for anything, right?
That's true.
So,
that's true.
Yeah, I think that it goes to show that a well-made or a well-designed competitive game doesn't have much room for extra stuff to be sold to you, right? And so even in this respect, like maybe multiplayer games aren't the same kind of art as a JRPG or a Souls-like, but I think furthermore, live service games can't be good multiplayer games either, right?
No, especially if they're scaling back on the art to sell it to you later. Like you're not even getting. There's so many.
They're going to be bad ones.
There's so many things wrong.
So they're doubly deficient in that sense. Yeah. Most Western game design is tending towards that, that way of making.
Yeah, it has been for a while, actually. Yeah.
It has, yeah. And I think even games that aren't strictly live format or live service format, they still try to incorporate the trappings of that.
True.
Like the most recent Assassin's Creed games were all designed in that manner. Games that are single player but have looter elements or always online requirements.
They were even talking about making like The Last of Us and Horizon turn into live service friend. Like, get out of here. What is that garbage?
I don't know. But
those games suck anyway. But whatever.
This is the definitive characteristic of Western game design in the past few years, right? This tension between making something,
ripping people off,
that exists for its own sake, and just trying to make money, right? Like those two things have to coexist when you're making something to be sold, but it has to be a priority of one over the other. And in Western game design, that priority it's disordered.
Yeah, it's
upside down.
Yep.
We've talked about Japan and things being different, but we can leave that for another day. Maybe we can leave that here, right?
Yeah.
Thank you guys very much for tuning in. That's our thoughts on the problems of Western game design.
Live service games.
Yeah.